Otherwise,
Chip's really good. Perfect. Because yeah, then we can process it and put it on our YouTube. Well, I want to say hi to everyone who will be watching this uh, in the future. As we record this, I want to thank Elizabeth for being with us. Elizabeth, do you prefer Elizabeth or Liz?
Either will do. Liz, Elizabeth.
Liz, do you prefer? Yeah, yeah. And we will be having a discussion. I'm going to stay on the call and participate as well, so we can have a lively discussion about these things. And we have a number of people, hopefully, that will be joining us in a bit, and also for everyone that's going to be watching on our YouTube channel. So again, my name is Tim Pollock. I'm the CRE coordinator for the Synod of the Covenant. This is our second workshop of 2025 on emotional intelligence. What's the buzz? I want to thank Reverend Kimberly Ashby for being here and leading us. I believe you are the pastor at Saline. Am I saying that right? In
yes,
Saline,
First
Michigan,
Presbyterian Saline.
right? There's so many First Presbyterian.
I know.
FPC, I see that acronym almost all the time.
Yeah.
But Reverend Ashby was also sharing with me that she helped develop emotional intelligence inclusion into these modules for the interim ministry network. And so hopefully we'll have a little bit of time at the end of our workshop to talk about what that is and really the vital role that CREs could play in interim ministry and transitional ministry and those kinds of things. So it's really exciting to see how emotional intelligence connects with that. But I don't want to say too much because I basically shared everything I know about emotional intelligence in this introduction. Um, and so, Liz, do you mind just introducing yourself and just share a little bit of who you are?
My name is Elizabeth Gary. Theory. Right now, I'm a part-time pastor at the Calvary Presbyterian Church, Ann Arbor. Um, I'm waiting to learn.
That's
So we are
great.
neighbors, Liz. If
Oh,
you're in Ann
yeah.
Arbor, I am just,
Oh,
we are 20 minutes apart. That's great.
oh,
Wow.
that's good to know.
Yes, actually, I've been needing to meet you, so this is good.
Yes, it is.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, welcome today. Thank you for joining us. How long have you been a CRE, Liz?
For a while, but I got this job recently. So
Okay,
it's a beginning
okay.
Mhm.
of serving as a commissioned pastor.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
Yeah.
great, great. Good
Wonderful.
to know. All right. Well, you ready for me to run, Tim?
Yeah, let's go ahead. We're recording. We've got Elizabeth is with us, and hopefully we'll get a few more people jumping in a little later.
Yeah. Okay,
Um,
sounds
but
good.
we will. This is our podcast. We are the Emotional Intelligence Podcast.
Yay! All right. Well, I will let me start with just saying telling how I got into emotional intelligence because I think that's a key part of the process, right? I've been doing this work since 2008. I was a solo pastor for the first time down in Sandusky, Ohio.
Mm,
And at that time, there was a new group together called the Center for Emotional Intelligence and Human Relations Training. They were doing workshops around the country and calling judicatory leaders and saying, hey, send us your promising folks who could use some more development. And we think we have something that will really help. So my adjudicatory leader showed me what was coming and invited me to go, and I leapt on it. I thought sounds exciting. This is some of the stuff that I really never got a chance to learn fully in seminary. It's stuff that started, when I did my CPE requirements, I started to see the need for some of these things. But the full kind of learning on that wasn't available in seminary. So I went to that workshop. It really transformed me. It applied to my personal life, it applied to my professional life. It is the continuing ed that I continue to grow from today because of how valuable it was to get insights about myself and to work with a group where I felt safe and secure to learn and grow more. So I then went from that to doing their second workshop and training to be a facilitator and trainer with them. And that is, I've been doing that now since, say, 2009, 2010. Off and on. That center has closed, but I'm now working with the Interim Ministry Network, as you said, Tim, and it's great work just to continue to support pastors in developing and being the best they can be. Now, that said, the research all over shows that emotional intelligence is one of the most important skills. Like our qualities, our knowledge gets us into eligibility for positions and actually into jobs. But what distinguishes us as being outstanding in our jobs, research proves, is the emotional intelligence skills. So when we want to improve, this is where we look. This is where we can really make some traction. And I felt that. I'm much more confident as a pastor. I'm much more able to handle the crazy situations that come up on the spur of the moment, the more I grow in these skills. So I'm excited to be able to share that with everybody today. So I'm going to walk through bits of this PowerPoint, and then there will be times when we stop and we discuss a little bit. Those of us who are on here. So
that's right.
Okay. We'll go with, okay. So the question is, with emotional intelligence, what's all the buzz about? And I think there's a lot. Emotional intelligence has been around since the 1990s, and it continues to gain traction and be something that people continue to learn and grow from. And the staying power, I think, says a lot. So today we're going to talk a little bit about understanding emotional intelligence. We're going to look at a model for evaluating emotional intelligence called the Emotional and Social Competency Inventory. We're going to do our own self-evaluation today. They don't offer self-evaluations much anymore because it's easy for people to say whatever they want to, I guess. It's hard to individually get a sense, but I think it's still valuable for us. Pastors are more likely to be hard on themselves and to be rigorously honest with ourselves. So I think we can do that and have it really work. We're going to use something called the Johari window. And then we'll get to some more about how emotional intelligence impacts and creates effective ministry. So when I was in college, this is what I learned a little bit about, was Howard Gardner's work on multiple intelligences. Came out in the late 80s, if I remember correctly. So you may remember this as well, that there's not just IQ that is hardened, but there's a lot of different intelligences: the linguistic verbal, the logical mathematical, visual and spatial. I could absolutely see this. I know people in my life who could see things in their heads. They could go in a house that had just been started and they could instantly see how it was going to be when it ended. I don't have that. Bodily kinesthetic, folks who appreciate being able to move as they learn and to incorporate it that way. Musical intelligence, intrapersonal and interpersonal, and then later he added naturalistic. But the interpersonal and the interpersonal really appealed to me in the beginning when I started learning his theory, and that's where emotional intelligence is built. It's built off that understanding of intrapersonal knowledge, knowledge about ourselves, knowledge about what's going on inside of us, who we are, our character traits, our values, what's important to us, how we interact, all of those kinds of things. And then interpersonal knowledge, knowledge of other people and how to relate to other people. This is where emotional intelligence finds its basis. And so when it got started, John Mayer and Peter Salovey took and created the first formulation of a concept of emotional intelligence. They are not well remembered in this field now. I'm not sure how much further they went, but they started it. And then Daniel Goleman picked up on the concept, and his first book was Emotional Intelligence, Why It Can Matter More Than IQ. He published that in 1995. He's done much more work since, published more books. And he and Richard Boyatzis work on the emotional and social competency inventory. So let's consider a little bit of what emotional intelligence is. There are a couple of, I grabbed several different definitions. They're all a little bit different. They could appeal to us in different ways. But here's the first one. It's the ability to understand and manage your emotions, as well as recognize and influence the emotions of those around you. So starting first with the intrapersonal, ourselves, to understand what we're feeling, how we're feeling it, how it manifests in our bodies. There are people who say to me, well, I don't really have feelings. And I think, well, yes, you do. But we do different things with our feelings. Sometimes we shove them down. Sometimes we let them go wild. It can be anywhere in the middle of that as well. That's kind of our spectrum of managing them. But sometimes we have to use it as, what is our body doing? Some people who are not feeling their feelings very well at least recognize when their gut isn't feeling right, and they might think they have indigestion or an upset stomach. But what that really is a marker of a feeling. So first, understanding and being able to manage, control, handle your own emotions. And then that other piece of emotional intelligence is about people around you, being able to see the person sitting across the table in a meeting and realize they're feeling something pretty strongly right now. They're upset, they're angry, they're whatever. Or even if I don't know what it is, I know there's something going on, and I could ask, I could check in with them. Influence comes in that section of being able to not just validate somebody else's emotions, but really be able to help them think through what they might be able to do with that emotion. So that's the Harvard Business Review. That's and Goleman works heavily with Harvard now, so that's probably much more in line with his concept of emotional intelligence. From Mental Health America, they say ability to manage both your emotions and your own emotions and understand the emotions of people around you. They define key elements as self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. And you'll see all those come clean when we work later on our self-evaluation and so forth. Merriam-Webster's online dictionary says it's the ability to recognize, understand, and deal skillfully with one's own emotions and the emotions of others, or showing empathy and good judgment in your social interactions. So they're all centering around understanding ourselves and what we're feeling, managing our feelings so that they don't go all over everybody else, and then using that to understand and be a partner with other people in what they're feeling. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about brain science and how all of this relates. So we know that there are different levels in our brain, and the emotions are centered more in the limbic section of our brain. This is what most people consider the lower part of our brain. That's we think of the higher parts as all the thought processes and the complex things that are going on as we figure things out and we notice in a relationship and we add all of our knowledge and so forth. And the feelings are relegated to the lower brain. And that can sometimes mean that they're not valued as much, but there's a deep relationship between all of this. The limbic brain surrounds what we call the amygdala, and the amygdala is a protection section of our brain. It's the brain, part of the brain that lodges all of the traumatic things that have happened to us. The limbic section kind of takes note of what could be a problem for us, and it alerts us, tries to keep us safe. It releases some of our hormones, all of this kind of thing. And so when the limbic system has a feeling, if the amygdala is triggered by that feeling, then that is where we can get a fight or flight kind of reaction. So people usually tell me that they have a thought and then they have a feeling about the thought. And the science can go any direction because people are detecting, but I think the best science that's being done out there shows that the feeling is either before the thought or right with the thought. But we might not always be conscious of the feeling. That's the challenge, right? Is to be conscious of what that is. So I want to tell you a little story about it because when those feelings come, we have thoughts about them. We have more feelings, more thoughts. It kind of goes back and forth in our brain relationally to have between those feelings and those thoughts. And it goes super, super fast. And when the amygdala triggers, it means that we don't have very long before that rush of hormones comes to help us cope with the feelings of fear or trouble that we sense coming. So for me, the story I like to tell is about dogs. Now, I want to say about 90% of the American public loves dogs. Okay. And I get it because there are dogs everywhere. There are dogs in people's homes when I go to visit. There are dogs out walking in the park. There are dogs in cars. There are dogs in stores now, everywhere. And in general, people assume that everybody loves a dog. But I am one of the 10%. So when I was a teenager, well, even when I was a child, let me start back there. When I was a child, um, we went a couple of times to visit an aunt and uncle of mine who we didn't see very often. And they had a dog that at my age was the relative size of a horse for me.
Oh,
So, and I don't remember the type of dog. I think I've been told at one time, I don't remember. I don't do well with dog types. But it was huge. And my aunt and uncle were determined that I love this dog. And they really wanted me to get close to the dog. They brought the dog close to me. And it was really paralyzing for me with fear. I was very intimidated. We didn't have any pets. I wasn't around any animals. So it was not a good start to any relationship with dogs. Um, Fast forward to being a teenager, I loved babysitting. Kids were great. I enjoyed doing that. I made money doing that. It was wonderful. But I would go into people's homes that had dogs, and sometimes it was not a good thing. Sometimes it was okay. Some of them would just put the dog aside for the night and wherever they had an extra spot for the dog. But I remember distinctly going to one house where I had never been before, and you had to park and walk up a good distance. And as I'm walking up, this dog comes tearing at me, barking.
mhm.
And of course, I'm panicking a little bit, but I thought, just keep walking. Well, the dog actually tried to bite my leg through my jeans. So, I'm what essentially what I want to say is the experiences I've had have taught me to be scared of dogs. Period. My amygdala triggers when there's a dog. And recently there was another one where we had a circumstance. One of my daughters is not too confident either, and this dog was running out barking. And I called the owner, and the owner says, "Oh, don't worry, there's an electric fence." Okay. We tried to keep going. The dog jumped the electric fence and landed on the sidewalk in front of us. So, for those of us who have trauma like this, it's real. And so when your amygdala triggers with a situation, that rush of feelings, that rush of things comes back, and it's a protection question. And in that moment, we have to be able to consider something that the amygdala can't process, which is this: does this situation in front of me fit what I'm afraid of, or does it not? And that's one of the great examples of how our limbic brain alerts us to a potential problem, sends us these feelings, reminds us of what's in the past. And then we have to, with our neocortex, kind of look at it and analyze it and decide fairly quickly whether or not this is something we really need to react to in that way. So how do those pieces come together? That's one of the ways. Now, that's one of the more extreme ways, but it works that way anyway. So that no matter what, even if it's a passive circumstance, even if it's a happy thing, I think I have this happy feeling come over me when I see someone I haven't seen in a long time whom I love.
Mhm.
I have that happiness in me, and I've learned to recognize what that feels like. I get a warm feeling in my body, and a smile comes to my face. And I think then, I'm so glad to see this person. But if I'm tracking it, the warm feeling starts even before I start thinking about it. The feelings are that instantaneous. And so for us to learn to be able to recognize them, to see how our body reacts in certain circumstances is really important. It's that first trigger to helping us understand this is what's happening inside of me. And now I can be ready to manage it. I can be ready to either take action or hold my action back until I think a little bit more and decide how I want to react in this. So I want to emphasize that that brain science reminds us of how upfront our feelings are, and encourage us that if we don't feel them very often, start to watch that body. When I'm in a church meeting or in a situation at church where someone is being critical of me, I get a certain feeling in the pit of my stomach that I know is that first moment of, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to deal with something big here. It's going to be personal. I'm going to want to take it personally. And I've got to hold on and manage that so that I don't go in a direction I can't take back. So learning where your body comes is a key part of this. Let me stop for a moment and see if anybody has any questions related to any of that brain science that might be helpful.
I know I've heard the other phrase I heard with the amygdala was the lizard brain. Like I know that's sort of like a shorthand,
Yes.
and it seems like a silly thing at first, but because we had discussions with it in our presbytery when I was first starting out, and it was important to recognize it. I don't want to use the word trigger, but to recognize that you might be having a response that is beyond the circumstances in that one moment.
Right.
It's like a pause. But yeah, I remember, almost a whole year of lizard brain talk, which I know is not. I don't think that's the scientific. You're the
It's
expert here,
not,
so
yeah, well, it's not a complimentary term that most of us feel,
right.
but what it's designed to evoke is that what happens in the amygdala is automatic response that
Hmm.
our brain has learned from its experiences. So it's going to happen whether you want it to or not. You're going to go through that moment of, oh my gosh, here's all this past stuff. But what we need to understand is that that doesn't mean we can't handle it and manage it.
Right.
We just have to be aware of it. So I think the lizard brain comes from the automatic sense. It
Hmm.
just comes. But what we do with it is huge. So that's why it's really important we bring it up and talk about it a little bit. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm also in the 10%.
I hear you, Melissa. I do. Thank you. We have some
um,
solidarity.
I don't hate dogs, but on the other hand, I don't like them jumping at me. And most people say, oh, they're just playing with you. No, to me, it's not a game. It's not because they like me. It's, oh, I'm scared. So,
Right.
yeah.
And
So my brain reminds me, oh, and then they leak all over you. And that's not something that, like, it makes me uncomfortable. So
yes,
I'm in
I'm with
the
you.
10%. I'm good, and I feel justified.
Mhm. Yeah. Those are numbers I made up. It may be more of us than 10%, who knows? But that's what
Yeah,
it seems like or feels like to me.
but it's okay. I mean, I it's okay when you love the dogs and everything, but not we all can't fit in the same, you know.
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. And this is another place where emotional intelligence really comes into play because if you're a dog owner, to notice the feelings of someone around you whom you're approaching with your dog gives you the context clues to decide how to handle your dog. And if you have good emotional intelligence, then you're reading. I mean, I'm sure, Liz, that when you and I are out and we're engaging with dogs or near them, we have body language which says, this is not my
Yeah,
cup of tea. But if
like
people
moving a
don't,
little away from.
yeah, or a facial expression that says, I'm wary, I'm worried. I know I have it because there are some dog owners who will say when they're approaching me, don't worry, I've got them,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
something like that. But emotional intelligence in a dog owner is that ability for them to read the room and to know this person might or might not love my dog. Let me check first. Let me imagine what it might be like to be someone who's scared of a dog, and let me check before I let my dog do something without permission from this other person. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that. That was sort of my question too, of because I think with emotional intelligence work, it's really easy for us to kind of think about our own responses.
Mhm.
But I was wondering that, and I'm glad you addressed it, of okay, well, how do other people read or not read
Mhm.
our fear responses or those kinds of things? So
Right.
I'm glad you brought that up as well. How it
Yeah.
operates not just with us, but around us too. And um,
Mhm.
what happens when people dismiss our responses or like
Yeah.
you said, the more positive of those that recognize
Mhm.
the response. I think that's really helpful. Thank
Right.
you.
And that is the whole gamut again of emotional intelligence is,
Right.
and what I'm going to explain a little bit is you have to understand yourself well before you can start understanding other people. And so the people who don't read the room and can't get it have to start here, because this is where it has to begin, is to understand yourself before you can really manage well to understand other people. Yeah. All right, well, let's keep going and let's look at that for a little bit, because that's an important part of this. Um, oh, all right. Okay, so this is the framework that Goleman and Boyatzis developed about emotional and social competency. And they put them both together because, of course, when you're relating to other people, that is a social framework. So it's got both levels. And as most things are, this is in a four-panel box. We seem to, I was telling Tim earlier, we seem to love either four-panel boxes or Venn diagrams these days. These are
Mhm.
this is what everything does. But we start in this upper left-hand corner. This is our self-awareness. And so you see on this side, we've got self and others. And on this side, we've got awareness and actions. And this is the format that the model takes. You can find this format online anywhere. If you look up emotional and social competency, if you look up Daniel Goleman's work, this is something that is easy for you to find. So in that upper left-hand quadrant is where we really work on our own self-awareness. It's, as I talked about with that story, it's understanding what your feelings are, when you're feeling them, how they manifest in your body. And it's also understanding what you want to do with them when they rise in you. So to notice that your desire to express anger comes directly from something that has made you angry. You're feeling something inside. And so if you're grumpy or blunt or upset with someone, it's being driven by some feelings that you're experiencing. And so you've got to be aware of that and then go back and say, well, if I didn't realize I was experiencing them, where are they coming from? What's driving this? Emotional self awareness allows you to see when you're projecting your stuff onto somebody else. Well, that person just blew me off. You may be projecting the fact that you felt blown off by someone. And so now you're doing it to someone else. Often, what we put onto other people is our own stuff that we just haven't dealt with or managed or become aware of. So, whatever dimensions it may be, we've got to understand our own emotions and our own selves first. Once we do that, we usually can move down the left-hand side next. Okay, so from awareness of what's going on inside of us, how we're feeling about different situations that we encounter in our lives, we usually can then move down to how to manage them, what we do with our actions. So that I might still be angry about a situation. I have plenty of times when I get on the phone with customer service calls and I've got a situation that I would like to have resolved and I feel like something on the other end needs to happen. I can now be aware that I'm getting angry instead of and decide that I'm not going to blow up at someone in customer service who obviously can't fix it and who doesn't have the power to make things in the system better. But I can manage that and pull it back and instead ask what other options I have. Can I speak to a manager? Is there a way to file a case and complaint about it so that it goes to another department? What can I do? Because when I blow up at the customer service person, they have no desire to help me get this situation resolved. So it's not going to be in my best interest. But when I manage my emotions, then I can come to a place that might help me say to that customer service person, look, I know that this is not your fault, that there's not a whole lot you can do about it. I appreciate you hearing that I'm upset. How can we work together to find a way through this? What are my other options? And often that will help a lot. So that is what it feels like to do some self-management. Now, I also did some social awareness in that too. So if you look up here and go to the right instead, once we have some self-awareness, we can both manage our emotions better, but we can also be aware of what's going on in other people. So I could say to this customer service person, you probably spend a lot of your day dealing with people who are upset. And I would find that really hard. You may too, and I'm sorry for that. That is empathy. That's putting myself in their shoes and understanding what they may have to deal with as well in their emotions, in their daily life, in their job responsibilities, whatever it might be. So I'm identifying with them. And that's the first step to really showing an awareness of what other people are going through and what they're experiencing. So these two quadrants grow next after our self-awareness. Again, usually it's our self-management first and then our social awareness. It can go the other way, but the more we have self-awareness, the more we can grow into those next two quadrants. Relationship management is what happens last. And what the research will tell you is that not everyone in life is going to be available or able to develop self-awareness. It will never get to 100% of the population. It can probably get up to 80 or 85%, but we need to understand that there are some people who will just never develop that self-awareness in the way we might hope. And that's the way it is. And then a percentage of people who develop self-awareness will be able to develop self-management, develop social awareness. And then a percentage of those will be able to really do a great job with relationship management. So because this is something that we can work on and improve through life, it is able to be changed. And not everybody will get there. And not everybody will be motivated to get there. It's something we need to understand. So when we get to relationship management, it means that not only do we have this self-awareness of our own emotions and how to manage them, and an awareness of how other people are feeling and the impact that what we say and do has on them, but then that we're able to take an active role in managing our relationships because of all these other skills that we've built, because we're able to understand what other people are feeling, how that might drive their actions. And so we can put all of that together into being able to work in a team collaboratively, in being able to manage a group of people, in being able to lead a congregation and understand that, there are going to be people who come up to me after worship and are not happy with a decision that I've made. And that I can be okay in the midst of that, and I can help them hear that I understand that they're not feeling okay, and that we can work on it together. It means that I understand that I don't have to change what I'm doing necessarily, but I do need to offer to them a way that we can deepen a relationship of dialogue, and that that's not a threat to either of us. It's a positive and good thing that we can do together. All right, so I wanted to, yeah, one more thing I want to say about this, looking at my notes to make sure I catch it all. So we hear so much about IQ, about our intelligence, our brain power, and that is more fixed for our life. We are born with IQ, like it or not, right? And there are plenty of tests, whether or not we like to take them, about our IQ. It is what we would call static. EQ is not. So it's important for us to recognize that we and anybody around us can grow in this throughout life, and that the way that we lead within our congregations, in our personal lives, in whatever frameworks we might be in, including in the community, the way that we lead, the way that we model these kinds of things will actually help us grow and help other people grow in their abilities to work through emotional intelligence. So I want to encourage us to see this as a wonderfully positive area in which we can continue to grow all of our lives. Most of the people that I've met doing this work were in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, still doing it because they loved it. And even in retirement, they didn't want to stop because they kept learning and growing about themselves and about how they relate to other people. That had a huge impact on me and on why I do this work and why I continue loving it. All of this, as you see in the bottom right here, the more that we develop all of this framework, it leads to a hugely positive impact on ministry. I actually came to the church in Saline because I was looking after my last positions. I had done a long pastorate, and then I'd done a short interim pastorate of about 1.5 years. And I wanted to go to a church that had been through conflict and had come out the other side and wanted to be healthy again. Why? Well, a number of reasons. One, because I've been trained in a lot of this and I'm interested in how we resolve conflict. Two, because lots of our churches do go through huge conflict in which the church splits, or a significant number of people leave, or there are hurtful dynamics. If we're going to figure out how to heal from that, we've got to start trying really intentionally to do that. And I felt like I had some of the training and the framework to give that a shot. And so Saline is a church that had been through a huge bit of conflict, did lose several people, and they proactively chose to work with a center and get training on conflict management. They developed some things, they worked through some things, and they were determined to rebuild. And I thought, this is ideal. They want this, and I want this. And this is why we're in this together. And I think this is another way where I'm seeing the positive impact in ministry that emotional intelligence skills can have. All right. So I want to stop for a minute and let us discuss a little bit. How do you see emotional intelligence relating to ministry? What connections are you making as I explain some of these things and so forth, what connections are you making to your work in churches and even in your life? And what questions are coming up for you about emotional intelligence and its application in the church? So let's stop the sharing and let's have a little conversation around that. Where are the connections you're seeing and questions do you have?
I could talk all day, so I'm going to see if Liz wants to jump in first, because I don't want to dominate the conversation here.
You and I have had some good conversations already about some of this, which I love. So Liz, is this
Yeah,
making any connections for you that you want to talk
it
about?
it is. It's very you do all these things, but you don't put them in the way you've put them. Like self-awareness and
Mhm,
how to manage it, whatever it is that's going on.
mhm,
The social awareness, the example you gave was very nice because
Mm,
when you're nice to people, then they kind of change and you can almost feel the change in the way they are treating you after you've told them, oh, you must be, most of the times I just thank people for their patience because I don't have that kind of patience to keep on telling you, no, I can't help you. And then you say, but, and they still try depending on who you're dealing with.
mhm,
And it teaches me that I cultivate patience every day, but I find myself short. And
mhm.
I don't think I'm the only one. Patience is very hard to. But when you show that social awareness of
Mhm.
the relationship becomes better because you're like you said, empathizing with them and you get to understand each other in a different way. So you might end up friends and saying, oh, have a blessed day after the beginning was like, oh, do I have to deal with this?
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah,
But
that's a great
yeah,
point.
yeah, I learned quite a lot, but I
Mhm,
hadn't put it in the way I like this, the way it's put,
mm, mm,
self-awareness, self-management, the social
mhm,
part of it, and the relationship. And you're right, every time you're dealing with people, that's what you go through. Because you can't be perfect to everyone.
mhm. No, we're all
So
going to lose it at some
yeah,
point or another. Mhm,
yeah, so yeah, I've learned
mhm.
and
Yeah.
I this is good. I'm going to practice in the I practice it, but I'm going to practice it in the, like with the awareness.
mm,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, it all fits together perfectly in that moment, right? You've got this issue, you call customer service, you can feel that anger, that frustration rising in you. And when you're able to notice that, then you can take a step back and I will say, I think so much of what I hear people saying, the phrases that people use today, something like be kind because you never know what people might be going through.
mm,
We've all heard that
Yes.
phrase, right?
Yes.
What that
Yes, we have.
is social awareness. That is exactly what that is. It's trying to say, think about things from somebody else's perspective and
Yeah.
understand them a little better so that you then change how you are acting in relation to them. It's
Yes.
that self management and that social awareness um, those corners interacting together.
And it's true, they could be going through something, maybe some bad news, and here you are, you know,
Mhm.
going on, but you don't know.
Right. Right. And so I often tell people just go through an exercise, put yourself in the shoes of the other person or look at their behavior and then come up with three possible stories that could have happened that would cause that behavior in them. So if someone comes into church in the morning and um, they're trying to make copies and the copy machine isn't doing exactly what they want it to do, whether or not they put it in correctly, right? We don't know. And they're
Yeah.
starting to yell and get mad at it. So I think, I could think to myself, okay, three different stories. One, they got a phone call from a friend that morning with bad news, taking it out on the copier. Okay. you know, Two is they tried to get the children out the door and the children weren't cooperating at all. And they've been exercising every bit of patience they had already. And now the copier is getting what the remainder, which is nothing. That kind
Mm.
of thing, generating three different stories. They may be outlandish, the car didn't start right away, or, it could be my third story. And maybe none of those happened. But what it does for me is it makes me calm down and be able to approach them in a light that says, hey, can I be of help this morning? Instead of going, why are you cursing out the copier? Copier didn't do anything to you. It's a different approach. And we will have people who come in to us at church with all kinds of things. And let's be frank about this, and candid. The church is considered by many to be a safe space to be who they are. And so we're going to get the raw emotions. We're going to get what people are truly feeling. We're going to get the stuff that they haven't managed completely because they feel safe with us. And there's an element of us that needs to take that as a compliment. And there's an element of us that needs to recognize it for what it is and understand that we may need to help them develop that ability to manage themselves, that ability to be aware of the impact of what they're doing on somebody else. I think it's kind of like what teachers go through these days when they think, well, parents aren't teaching their children certain things that now I'm expected to teach them. Sometimes this is what it's come to because we don't have enough of this in our culture, enough awareness. So that's the real place of where it comes back to our churches. So Tim, I'm sorry. What do you want to add?
First, Elizabeth, I like how you talk about cultivating patience. I think instead of saying gaining patience, I like cultivating because it's a practice, and sometimes you have more and some days you don't, for a variety of reasons. I was thinking of two things. So I'm fortunate that I've been serving at the same church for 12 years. And when I had arrived, those first 3 years were difficult because there was a lot of unresolved conflict before I got there that hadn't quite been resolved, and there was a lot of hurt feelings between people in leadership. I remember one person in particular. It was difficult because I would often feel attacked, defensive with this person. But when I learned that he was a caregiver for not only his wife, but also for his mom, and that he's a full-time farmer managing all these different fields, I think, even though it was still hurtful at times, I think I began understanding better where his emotional life was in all of this. The other thing I will say, though, is that doing emotional intelligence work, it's never too late to get started. And I think when we put the time in, you do see the dividends over time, because for every crisis that you make it through, there will be another one. And the more time you put in doing emotional intelligence work, not only for yourself, but with your congregation, the next crisis, you're better prepared or more resilient. So, and I share this. Let me first say that everyone is safe. The dogs are safe. Chickens are safe. Okay, so let me just. I'm not saying this for, to try to garner sympathy and that sort of thing. But recently, we have a house manse, a parsonage, whatever term you want to use, that we've been renting out. When I started, I already had a house, so I didn't move there. Was recently consumed in a fire. So it's a total loss. Family got out fine. The dogs got out fine. Out of the 8 chickens, 6 survived, and I found a foster home for the chickens. So that's the most important part, right? And actually, I just spoke with the family yesterday. But if this had happened those first 3 years I started, the church would be a total mess right now, because there were so many fights and so many hurt feelings about finances, what to do with the money, those kinds of things. And I'm seeing a difference now where the anxiety peaked a little bit. I mean, that's natural, but it didn't derail. It didn't turn into factions. It didn't,
Mhm.
and I think it's because we've been together long enough that people had the proper perspective on what had happened. They're comfortable taking time. The anxiety level just didn't overwhelm and fracture the church. And I think a lot of it is just because you can't predict what crises are going to happen in the church. And there will be more. There's always something that's going to put stress on the system or something that's going to disrupt. But so the work that we do in emotional intelligence is not just about the present time, but resilience for the future, and handling these things in a more healthy way. So it's just a real, because I know if this had happened when I first started, it would be a completely different environment right now, except for what's going through now. So again, just to let you know that, insurance has been doing their thing, everything's like in process right now. And just regularly checking on the family. In fact, the family has received so many donations that they're using the church building to sort through things because they don't have storage for the things they can't use. So they bring it to the church, they sort through it, we put it aside in case they need it later. The deacons, and that's what I'm saying. So we had a group of people that said, what are the birthdays of the kids? There's 3 kids. And so people are already thinking more about what to help and not when's the money come in or what do we do with it. So, but I'm just sharing that as a positive example that the work that you do, even 10, 12 years ago, you will see these dividends. And so it brings it back to Elizabeth, how you're saying cultivating patience. I think that's a good metaphor to use for emotional intelligence work too, that you cultivate it and you will see these dividends over time, and a higher level of resilience, which I know you haven't talked about yet, Kim. But I think mental resilience is probably wrapped up in all of this as well. I suspect.
I would agree. I don't know that I plan to exactly talk about it in that direction, but I think that's exactly right, Tim. And what I love about your story is that it shows another of these principles. Just because we understand how people are feeling doesn't mean that we need to accept the poor behavior. We can help people learn new behaviors, which is what you've obviously done. You've helped your congregation learn new ways to manage their stress and their anxiety, to recognize when that's being triggered, to handle it more positively and as a team. You've taught them a lot of good things that now helped this situation really go a lot lot better. And that
Well, it
makes
helps me to be an
things,
actual leader. It helps me do my job too, right?
it does.
Like when people are growing with their own emotional intelligence, it's sort of like you're freed up to do the work you think. It's a part of the work. Like I don't want to say it's over here, but it allows you to lead in a more positive way, and not be weighed down with your own anxiety and fears, and
Right.
because that can happen too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Or laying awake at night going, why did that person say that to me? Or, why are these two people upset
Oh
about
yeah,
this?
I still have those nights. I don't want to paint this as like I've graduated from emotional intelligence. I've had plenty of those nights of where I cannot get out of my head something somebody said. So I'm just, for the record, um, we still have those moments, but it you just kind of, the advancement is okay. Maybe it doesn't last for a week. Maybe it's half a week. Maybe it's recognize. Okay, I get it. But no, I still have those nights, and I put my foot in it plenty of times. So
Yeah.
there's some moments
But
where I'm not aware of what's happening with me, and I trample over everything. So yes, it still happens.
but you learn through it, you grow through it. Like you're
Yeah,
saying,
yeah.
it takes a while to get, and you also said something about people who are still preaching at a later age. They love what they're doing. It's because they've learned, they've grown through it, and it reaches a point where you you leave it to God. And in the end, the intelligence is just there, it flows, and you're able to deal with one thing at a time. But that what you are describing is really, really needed that needed God and his grace to go through it, because it's easy, it's hard to deal with so many different, I'll use types of people, meaning, different emotions. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And we have to help ourselves bear up under our own and other people's in order to help them to be able to see as well. Yeah.
This is
All right.
interesting. You should teach all them.
See, I would love to just get a whole church and do, really
Yeah,
do
that would be beautiful.
It would, but what I've had to settle for right now is we start with training leaders, right? We start with training leaders, and then we help them think about the system. And this is one connection where the work I do with the Interim Ministry Network is really great. They have Fundamentals of Transitional Leadership program that helps you with the head knowledge around being a leader in transition, which, let's face it, all of us are in ministry these days. But they also give the emotional intelligence pieces around it, and the skills. What I helped write is the skills for managing groups, for helping people come together and learn to work together, and for training people in some of these things that are really helpful. So we'll come back to that at the end, but this is the moment of our first break. We're going to take about a 15-minute break. In that time, I'm going to ask Tim if you'll post in the chat those two files. Liz, if you have a way to print or else open either one, we're going to work with these two handouts after our break. Let's see. The one we'll need first is this one, which is a self-evaluation on emotional intelligence. And then we'll use this one second. So what I did is I just printed them because I'm going to actually write on them. If you don't have the ability to do that, then just having them open would allow you to type on them, which would also be fine. So 15 minutes.
I got them through. Yeah, I think I got them through. So there we go.
Okay, great.
Yep, there they are.
Double check to make sure.
Yep,
I see them. Awesome.
Yep. So so they're just in the, if you click the little chat icon, you should see the documents there. And so let me, I'm not sure how to do that, but so 15 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm going to set my timer here.
See if I can pause the recording, and we'll come back just after 10:20 and we'll keep going. Okay. Sound good, Liz?
Thank
I
you.
know you're muted, so you don't have to respond.
Yes, it does. I was trying to open the.
Yeah, see if you can open those.
I can open them on the computer. I'll see whether I can print it.
Okay, sounds good.
Here.
But try not to get too angry at the printer, right? Like so if the printer.
Don't worry, it will stay on my desk. I won't throw it. No.
All right. I will be back.
We'll
be back in about 15 minutes then, and pick up from there. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so back from our break, what I want to do, you may have noticed that when I showed the emotional and social competency framework, I did not address all the different subcategories in it. And we're going to go back now and we're going to do that, but we're going to do that with Daniel Goleman. Because I found a lovely video where he explains all this. And since it is his work, I think it's really good for us to let him tell us a little bit more about it. So
when you go to share, make sure you say share computer audio, I believe.
Yeah. So I've got share. They changed it to share sound. And then I've got
optimize. If that's what it is, then yeah.
Okay, so hopefully this works. So we did this slide already. We did our break. All right, so before we get there, wanted to throw this up for us. It is my contention in life and ministry that emotional intelligence actually bridges the gap that helps us have effective ministry. So, as pastors, as commission ruling elders, we receive education. There are CRE programs, there's seminary degrees, all of that. We receive some training, pastoral care and CPE programs. We have experience in our churches, both before and after we are in ministry. But my experience is that in the PCUSA, the journey doesn't really pay attention to our skills and abilities in emotional intelligence, which I believe are the bedrock of being able to handle the complex relationships in a church, especially in times of conflict. They really train us more to be theologians, to have the head knowledge, to preach and to teach, to have some of the skills for pastoral care, but they don't focus as much on our internal posture as a leader and how we help guide our people and how we manage the emotional context that we have within the church. There's not very much good research done on churches, but this is one of the studies that I've found that's cited. It's from 2011, so it's a little old, still fully relevant. They studied 52 Catholic priests and their parishes in Ohio, and they found a very strong correlation between high emotional intelligence in priests and high parishioner satisfaction. Now, ironically, that study also showed that that did not mean that people contributed more to the church in terms of money or time and effort, but they were highly satisfied. So they weren't going anywhere and they were going to still contribute at their same level. So, studies show interesting things. It's one of the few studies that's directly on emotional intelligence and ministry, but it has a very strong high correlation for that satisfaction. So I think that's significant for us to remember. All right, so we want to take a deeper dive. I put up the tools because I really think of emotional intelligence as a set of tools that we use in our lives. With that, we're going to take that handout on our self-evaluation on emotional intelligence, and we're going to let Goldman walk us through. I'm going to pause the video at a few different times for us to be able to evaluate the different quadrants. So you can see emotional self-awareness on the paper is its own thing, but then under self-management, there are 4 different aspects: social awareness 2, and relationship management 5. So we'll pause and we'll give some time. As you see, I've asked you to rate yourself between 1 and 5. 5 means you show this emotional intelligence quality regularly and consistently across all aspects of your life, your professional life, your personal life, your life out in the community, whatever it might be. You show it in all areas consistently and regularly. Going down to a 4, you might show it regularly and consistently in some areas of your life, but not all. Or you might show it in all areas, but not as consistently or regularly as you'd like. 3 means you recognize that you have some of this quality, but you use it occasionally, but not regularly. It's not really in there for your tool bag that you're always pulling it out. 2, you have a little of it or you use it rarely. 1, you just don't see this EI quality in yourselves. So does that make sense? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Let's listen to Goldman, see what he has to say. Let me know if you can't hear it. Hopefully you'll be able to. Let me start now.
Today you and tomorrow you aren't the same person. If you're tired of what today you is doing, get an accounting fundamentals certificate from WGU School of Business and get a whole new tomorrow you in just 6 months. Enroll today at WGU.
Sign up for the PF Flat Card and get your first month free. $1 down, $24.99 a month. Deal ends March 13th.
When I wrote the book Emotional Intelligence, a lot of people had an aha experience like, oh, so that's what's going on. It was the first time that for a popular audience, emotional intelligence had become well known. I was a science journalist at the New York Times back then, and I'd been covering a decade of research on the brain and emotion. And I wanted to have a frame for that. I integrated it with the findings from research on outstanding performers. And I saw that people who emerge as outstanding performers or the best leaders have high emotional intelligence. So from the get-go, I've seen emotional intelligence as having to do with leadership. And this was taken up by the Harvard Business Review. They've done a series of articles, starting with one which said, look, emotional intelligence is the core of effective leadership.
Oh, good grief.
And now I talk about 4 domains of emotional intelligence and then 12 particular competencies of people who are high in emotional intelligence. A combination of self-awareness, managing your emotions well, social awareness, empathy, tuning into other people, and putting that all together to have harmonious or effective relationships. Unlike IQ, which barely budges over the course of our life, emotional intelligence can change. It's learned and learnable. And it's learned and learnable at any point in life. Self-awareness means you know what you're feeling, you know how it shapes your perceptions and your thoughts and your impulse to act. Emotional self-awareness is what I'm talking about. Emotion directs attention. So knowing what you're feeling and how strongly you're feeling it and where it's driving you to attend is extremely important because your attention creates your reality moment to moment.
Okay, so let's pause there for a moment and go ahead and consider your emotional self-awareness. I appreciate his nuance here that your feelings direct your attention. So go ahead and rate yourself on your emotional self-awareness. You don't need to share these. Okay, we'll keep going.
So self-awareness gives you a kind of diagnosis of where am I right now. Maturity is sometimes defined as widening the gap between impulse and action. Self-awareness, it's the least visible part of emotional intelligence, but we find in our research that people low in self-awareness are unable to develop strengths very well in other parts of emotional intelligence. People who are high in self-awareness, however, are able to develop excellence across the board very often. Self-management in my model has 4 different components. One of them is handling upsetting emotions so they don't get in the way of what you have to do right now. Another aspect of emotional self-management is marshaling positive emotions, seeing the bright side of things, not just the glass is half empty, but feeling pretty good about what's happening no matter what happens. And that lets you also be agile, another aspect, adjust to changing situations. You want to have a growth mindset, see yourself as able to improve and other people as able to improve. And finally, you want to keep your eye on the goal that matters, despite the distractions of the day. So goal focus is an emotional self-management tool too.
Okay, we're going to pause there and let you look at those 4 categories under self-management and rank yourself on those, evaluate yourself there. Okay, we'll keep going to the next section, social awareness.
In my model of emotional intelligence, the third part is social awareness, which in one sense means sensing how your organization works. It's a kind of systems point of view. But I think as a leader, what matters more is empathy. How you tune into your people, the people around you, the people above you, to the side, below you. And tuning in has three parts. One is cognitive empathy, understanding how that person sees the situation, what their perspective is. It's walking a mile in their shoes, as the proverb says. You're able to sense the language or mental models a person uses as a frame on reality. What language do they use to explain what's going on to themselves? If you have high cognitive empathy, you can message quite well. You can hit the target with what you say to the person because you know the language that they understand. The second part is emotional empathy. This has to do with the design of the social circuitry in the human brain. The brain is designed to lock into the brain of the person in front of us and to create a pathway that's instantaneous, automatic, and unconscious for what that person is doing, intending, and feeling.
You are charged with violating U.S. anti-money laundering laws.
This lets us know what the person feels because we feel it too. We get an inner signal that tells us what's going on with the other person. And this helps us keep our interaction on the same page, on target, emotionally. The third part of empathy, which I think is really important for leadership and all too often just ignored, is caring. It's called technically empathic concern. And it means, I know what you think, I know what you feel, but I also care about you. And so leaders have to have this ability to communicate that they care about the person, they're concerned about them. This, by the way, builds huge trust, huge rapport between a leader and the people they lead.
Pausing for a moment to let us give ourselves evaluation on empathy and organizational awareness. Okay, let's go to the last segment. I apologize for the ads, but I'll just keep trying to get through them.
The fourth part of emotional intelligence is relationship management. It's what we see every day. It's what leaders display. Can you guide? Can you influence? Can you get work done well through other people? Can you inspire? Can you get the best out of people because you can articulate meaning here in what we're doing? Are you a good team member? Not just on your team at the same level. If you're in the C-suite, that's a team. How are you as a team player? And then how are you as a team leader? Can you handle conflicts well? Can you keep yourself calm and listen to both sides and come up with a good enough solution that both sides can accept? Do you realize that you are in a position to help the people you lead become leaders of the future? Can you help them develop strengths? Can you coach them? Can you mentor them? Can you help them strengthen the leadership cadre of your organization going into the future?
To learn even more from the world's biggest thinkers, Get Big Think.
All right. Take a few moments and do those relationship management pieces if you haven't already. All right. Anything that we learned from this? Anything new that you're interested in or curious about from going through each piece of these? Yeah, you got anything?
I don't remember achievement orientation as being a part of emotional intelligence. I think that's kind of interesting.
Mhm.
That's probably one of my lower rankings. Actually, I've had to work really hard with different coaches and such around that particular issue, but I think that's an interesting piece that I'd never really considered before as a part of emotional intelligence. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, they sometimes link that to motivation, which I think
Mm,
is interesting. I mean, it's definitely an element. You can be focused. Being focused on a goal requires being motivated to achieve it, but it also requires the ability to really hone in on it and see the
mm,
steps of how to get there. Um, so it is. They put it as part of self-management because of that, because of that
mm.
motivation factor in it, which makes it interesting too.
Yeah, the hardest questions that I always have to answer, I can answer almost any question, but if somebody asks me what I want, I don't often know what to even say.
Mhm.
And so I thought that was interesting. I was like, oh, okay, and I recognize it's an area of definite growth for myself.
Mhm.
But yeah, I've never made that connection before, so that was really helpful.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. Not seeing anything from
And
the others. Oh, yeah, there you are. Go ahead.
the relationship management, there's so much to do as the leader, and sometimes you might not look at it that way, but when the way it's put, it comes out clearer. I don't know whether um, because you have a lot to do for the other side, but you have to have
Mm,
it. So, you know, it takes um, looking into yourself and finding a way to do all that.
Mhm.
Because you have to guide, you have to display, you have to influence, you have to inspire people. So there's so much to do, but you need it yourself before you can give it out.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I would add a couple of things. I think a lot of us, especially as pastors, don't believe we do these things nearly as much as we actually do.
mm,
I think that's a really important thing to note. After this many years of, and I haven't done it as much as others in my my colleagues have, but after enough years of coaching pastors, I've seen this trend that we tend to minimize what we do and
Yeah.
not recognize
mm,
it.
And it's because it's you're doing your job,
Mhm.
in quotes, so you don't look at it like a CEO would in a secular job, So that's how I would explain that. You
Mhm.
have it in you, you can do it, but it's not looked at like you're in a job where somebody is saying, okay, sit down. What did you do?
Mhm.
And you don't get to give yourself the numbers. Like, I think it's a good thing to look at this and give yourself some numbers to see where you're short and where you're not.
Yeah.
So I'll keep mine with my numbers. I'm glad I don't have to show them.
No, no, you don't. And the other thing I want to add here that I think is important, and not many people will bring it up. Some people will think about it, some won't. I think it's important to note here that emotional intelligence can be used in negative ways.
mhm,
Um, you might have seen from some of this how easily these skills can um, edge over into manipulation. If you really understand how to show empathy, you can mock it, whether or not you
mhm,
actually feel it, and manipulate people into doing things. And I find that particularly in the church world, when I work with people around these concepts, they are highly sensitive to that. Well, isn't being an influence actually manipulating people? No, it's not. When it's properly handled, it's not. Manipulation comes when you are using people's emotions against them to get them to do something they don't want to do.
Mhm.
When you are tapping in and inspiring people and helping them be in touch with their own emotions and helping them think through potential involvement, potential behavior, those kinds of things, that's a positive use of influence. Manipulation is one of the negative uses of influence. And I think we see
That's
too much in
interesting.
politics.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, well, so what you're saying is when we remove the caring empathy part, that's where the whole thing can turn more manipulative quite quickly. If you
Yeah,
don't have that
when
basic
you
level of
take the
compassion and
human,
care. Yeah,
the
yeah.
human
Mm.
aspect out of it, right?
When you're
Because
looking for something to gain of it.
Mhm.
there are people
Mm.
who can read they can use the cognitive empathy and the emotional empathy, and they can read someone and go, okay, you can, like, for example, I have bought used cars before, right? I don't buy new cars anymore. I buy used cars, but I watch the salespeople and the people who have been doing it the longest. They tune in on what's important to you. They
Mhm.
watch for that. They're trained to.
Mm.
And they watch for your emotional expressions and they hone in there. Now, those are good sales techniques. Any salesman will tell you that. And yet, you can easily go over the line with those
Mhm.
and use them to push people into something that they don't really want because you figured out what they want to hear. And so but you're divorced from that third part of empathy he talks about, which is the genuine caring for people. When you lack that, you're willing to manipulate anything else to get what you want. And that's where the negative side of it happens.
Yeah, two things. One, I was desperate for work and actually sold cars for 3 months. I didn't last very long, but so I can affirm. I won't tell the story here uh, of what broke the straw, but there was a congratulations to me for selling a car when they had set me up to lie, essentially, which I didn't care for. And they're like, "That's how you sell cars." I'm like, "I don't want anything to do with that." But the other piece that I think is really interesting, and maybe you're going to get to this, but I think part of, for me, emotional intelligence is to, if you truly recognize the dignity of the other human being, you have to accept their no's. I think that's a key thing, right? They have every right to say, no, I cannot do this. And I think that's a sign of maturity actually within an organization, that you can allow people to be honest with what they're feeling. And, I had one of these really difficult conversations with a congregant. I know they're probably never coming back to church. And this is somebody I've worked very closely with. And, unfortunately she's going through separation, divorce, and there's too many connections to make that work. And so in a way she misses us, but she can't. There's too much toxicity that she's got to work through. And it's hard to accept that, right? Because we're supposed to bring in as many people, don't lose anybody, but you have to let people make decisions. And I think personally that's the hardest part of leadership and emotional intelligence, is because you're like, I'm the leader, I should be able to get people to stick around and stuff, but you have to, like, they have their own lives and they have to be honest about what they can and cannot do. And we have to accept that. That it's okay for other people to say no. It's fine.
Yeah, because otherwise we're not respecting their sense of their own emotions and thoughts and actions. We have to do that. it could be that the very things we're good at, maybe we are inspirational leaders, maybe we are great visionaries, maybe we do have an influence, and it may influence them to a path that is not the one we wanted them to take.
Absolutely.
And yet if they're feeling the Spirit and this is God's direction, then that's it. Yeah. So emotional intelligence ties in deeply with boundaries. Right?
Yeah.
So that's a piece that I'm not addressing today, but it is a real piece of this, is that when you are emotionally intelligent, you recognize your own boundaries and you mind them, and you recognize the boundaries of others and when you bump into them and how to handle that and manage that appropriately. Yeah. So that's a great, I'm glad you brought that up, Tim.
Oh, thanks.
Very much important. Okay, well, we're going to get into maybe some things with that a little bit in the next piece I want to do. So we're going to talk about the Johari window. So I'm going to go back and share that, and we'll talk through it a little bit, and then we're going to actually do it. Do a little work on it ourselves. So this and so let me get to the next slide. Whoops, hold on. Sorry about this. I haven't move on from this slide before, so let me try this again. All right, let's go. Okay, well, it's still gonna. All right. I apologize. Obviously, I haven't had to work with this.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's happening over there.
All right, that might have it. Let me try again now. Because when I watched the video the other day, it didn't have all the ads in it either. So I got extra ads today that I wasn't expecting.
Yeah.
There we go. All right, now we got it. Okay,
Great.
so the Johari window was developed by Joseph Luft and Harrington Ingham in 1955. I don't see it as frequently today, but I really value what it shares. And so I wanted to make sure that we used it today. This is another view into how we see and understand ourselves and each other. So again, this is another 4 boxes. And we look at we look at on one dimension, what is known to ourselves and what is unknown to ourselves. And then we look on the other side as what is known to others and unknown to others. So using this lens, let me explain a little bit more. So in this box, and the size of these boxes varies in our lives, but in this light red box or orange box here, what we would put down, and we're going to do this in a couple minutes, is what we know about ourselves and what others know about ourselves, because we openly share it. So even in the time that I've spent with both of you, I would be able to say some things that I know about you and that you know about yourself because you disclosed them to me. You shared them today. It's where you work and how long you've been doing different things and some of the things that are important to you and some of the experiences you've had. Liz and I both know that we are not happy dog people. You know, those are things that known to self, known to others because we share them. Now, there are a whole lot of parts of our lives that are known to us, but we don't share with others, this blue box. So there are things that I think and that I feel and that I know about myself, but I'm not sure how somebody else would react to them. So I may not share them. or I might share them with some people, but not others. We constantly review that and we curate what we want other people to know. So this blue box can be pretty large in what we know about ourselves, but we're not ready or we don't feel safe to share with other people. And it's important for us to be aware of how much is in that box about ourselves. Now, on the other hand, and this is where emotional intelligence inventories really help, when the inventory I use asks you to get at least, they prefer 15 other people to give input about you. That brings us to this yellow box. So there are things that I don't know about myself, that I don't recognize about myself, but other people know about me and how they experience me. So I might think that in fact, I've thought this many years of my life, that I'm not a very big influence on others, that I have my values, I go about my work, I try to do a good job, but it doesn't really influence anybody in a positive way. Now, other people might say, oh my gosh, that's not true at all, because you were in my life for a while, and because of your influence, I ended up doing XYZ. You have a tremendous influence. I don't see it. It's not known to me, but other people see it about me. How do I find out these things? Well, I find out these things when I talk to people, when I ask for feedback, when I have dialogue with them, when they share with me things that they want me to know about the impact I've had on their lives. Then this yellow box, which could be large if I'm not talking to people and hearing from them, their experiences of me, this yellow box could grow smaller, because the more I have dialogue, the more that the things in this box move up here into this orangey color, because now they've shared them with me and I know them about myself. Now, I'm not going to get into the point of whether or not I believe them about myself. That's a different thing, right? We need to, that also takes time. There's also a box, our green box is kind of our mystery box, things that are unknown to us about us, and things that are, and in an equal way, other people don't know them about us. So these are things that are buried inside of us, things that we may not want to deal with, things that we've hidden, things that we haven't explored or discovered yet about ourselves. And therefore others don't know them about us either. And this box, it's hard to know how big it is, how much of that is there that we haven't explored, that we don't know or recognize or acknowledge about ourselves, that other people don't know either. But the process of emotional intelligence helps us to develop a greater understanding of ourselves and others that changes the size of these boxes. So what I want us to do is to take a few minutes to fill out what we can of this. All right. So there's not going to be much to write in green, because if we don't know it and nobody else knows it, we can't write it down. But we can especially work on our orange box and on our blue box. And then you may be able to think of things that people have disclosed to you that you didn't recognize about yourself, that you could put in the yellow box. I mean, technically, yes, you do know them now, but it's good to explore, what are those times that people have revealed something to me that I really didn't realize about me? Sometimes it's an unconscious habit that drives somebody else nuts. We don't know we're doing it. And somebody says, oh my gosh, would you please stop tapping your pencil all the time? You do that every time you're not sure what to do about something, and I can't stand it. Oh my gosh, I didn't know I did that. Those are the kinds of things that might go in that box. So I'd like us to take about 7 minutes or so and fill out what we can in these boxes. And then we're going to come back and we're going to talk a little bit, not as much about content, but about general big picture things with this experience after we've done it. So I'm going to stop the share, see if anybody has any questions before we take those 7 minutes. Okay, let's do it. I'll pause the recording and we'll come back in a minute.